listener production.
Hello, welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. If you flicked on the telly at some point over the last few weeks to catch the news or a cheeky maths dinner party maybe, you've probably been greeted by a familiar face, Clive Palmer's.
The landscape is very hospitable to the kind of messaging that Palmer's putting out there, but the party landscape is actually going to be pretty crowded.
Why the billionaire is back campaigning after a disastrous 2022 election and whether parroting Donald Trump's policies could actually work is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, it is time for the headlines with Chris Spiru on Monday, March 17.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody, and happy Monday. And look, we're entering what we're going to call pre-budget week, with just 7 days until the Treasurer hands down the earliest ever budget in Australia's history. And we're already getting a sense of what it will cover, including the cost of Cyclone Alfred and details of an economy that's struggling to grow. In a speech in Queensland tomorrow, Jim Chalmers will reveal Alfred has dealt a $1.2 billion blow to the coffers due to the cost of federal assistance packages for thousands of people and the cost to help rebuild critical infrastructure like roads.
Early Treasury estimates also suggest the cyclone will cut a 0.25 percentage point from overall economic growth and increase inflation pressures. Now, these are all issues that the budget was already going to be dealing with. So not the news Labor wanted to be handing down weeks out from an election. And this is exactly why Anthony Albanese had been trying to get April 12 locked in as the polling day. But if you remember, that plan was also ruined by Cyclone Alfred because he was going to do it the weekend that it hit and then he went, no, I can't do this because, you know, the focus for everyone was on making sure that everyone who was impacted was okay and that, you know, people had the assistance that they needed, not on an election. And now typically we can expect some nice sweeteners in a pre-election budget, but no leaks yet. And we'll just have to wait and see what the next week brings. And of course, we'll be bringing you every little tidbit we can before next Tuesday.
Yeah, we love to hear it. Meantime, Anthony Albanese has said Australia will carefully consider sending a small contribution of peacekeepers to Ukraine, should we be asked. It comes following a video call chaired by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer over the weekend, which also included the leaders of Canada, New Zealand, Europe, and of course, Ukraine. Albanese having this to say on Sunday.
Australia has a proud record over 80 years of participating in peacekeeping missions, including in Africa, in Cyprus, in a range of countries around the world. It would be a small contribution if we chose to do so, but what we want to see is peace so that you can have peacekeeping.
While remaining tight-lipped about the details of the meeting and how the Coalition of the Willing, as this group has been dubbed, will continue pressuring Putin into peace, he did have this to say.
Vladimir Putin's a bully. You know what Australians do? They stand up to bullies.
Noticeably absent from this meeting was the US, but it is expected Trump and Putin will make contact later this week to iron out the details of that Ukraine-backed 30-day ceasefire.
Interesting to hear harsher language from Anthony Albanese. I do think the Trump tariff issue has given all politicians across the political spectrum sense that Australians kind of want someone to be a little bit stronger on the world stage, and it looks like Albanese is kind of taking that. And look, speaking of and sticking with politics, the Greens have come out, Adam Bandt, the leader, to say that he thinks that we should ditch AUKUS now. Now, that's the nuclear submarine deal between Australia, the US and the UK as well. Don't forget the UK is also involved in this one. And it's kind of like it's not a formal military pact, but the idea is that it's sharing of military, weapons, essentially, the submarines, and, you know, it kind of strengthens an already existing alliance. Now, the Greens have never been a fan of this plan, so it's not a surprise that they're saying, we should ditch it. But Adam Bandt said we should get out of AUKUS. Now is not the time to be hitching Australia's wagon to Donald Trump. It puts Australia at risk, and it is billions of dollars being spent on submarines that might never arrive. The PM has already ruled out walking away from AUKUS, it's worth noting. He says it's a good deal for Australia. And just one more thing before we move on, sticking with politics and the Greens, They're going to start campaigning this week. Last week, they were on the let's legalise weed train. Now they're going, hey, let's make a 4-day work week official. So I feel like I see who they're appealing to. But they're saying that, essentially over the last few years, our productivity as workers has continued to increase, but our wages haven't. So 4-day work week makes sense. This is what the Greens are saying. So the policy would create a national test case through the Fair Work Commission and then establish a national institute for the 4-day work week. So there would be a process that you'd have to follow in order to be able to get the 4-day work week. Obviously, it's not going to work for everybody. But yeah, that's the Greens' latest policy platform. They're the ones doing all the hard work with campaigning at the moment, coming out with policies. So I'm sure there'll be plenty more before we go to the polls.
To North Macedonia now, where at least 59 people have died and more than 150 others have been injured in a nightclub fire in the country's east. The blaze, which broke out around midday yesterday our time at the Pulse Club in Kokani, is believed to have been started by sparks from pyrotechnics that were set off during a concert by a popular hip-hop duo. It is understood at least 1,500 people were in attendance, with the youngest confirmed victim just 14 years old. Most of the victims were young, in their 20s.
Yeah, taking to social media, the country's Prime Minister said it was a difficult and very sad day for the country, which had lost many young lives. He did go on to promise the government will do everything in its power to help the victims and their families. Now, at least 4 arrest warrants have been issued, according to reports. One of them is for the club's owner, but investigations are continuing. At this stage, Chris, it looks like it could have just been a really awful accident, but whether there's negligence involved is obviously something that will form part of these investigations.
Oscar Piastri says there's nobody else to blame but himself after spinning out of a second place in Melbourne's rain yesterday at the Australian Grand Prix.
I've got the McLarens. First of all, Lando Norris, then Oscar Piastri as the Australian driver spins at the penultimate corner of the racetrack. Is that the moment that home victory dreams are dashed for Oscar Piastri?
The heartbroken Aussie went on to finish 9th.
Pretty disappointed. Felt like it was a pretty good race, apart from that one mistake that cost a lot. So yeah, just a shame.
McLaren teammate Lando Norris claimed the win ahead of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it was such a heartbreak for Piastri, but hopefully, so my only link to the F1 this season has been the Oscar Piastri burger at Grilled, and this is by no means sponsored. I haven't actually eaten it, but that's the only thing I've noticed. But we have a colleague, our producer Helen Smith, who's amazing. She's been down in Melbourne, so I'm sure she's going to be really upset that Oscar crashed out. So commiserations to Oscar Piastri, but congrats to Lando Norris. And we've talked about it plenty on the briefing, but this week looks to be the week that 2 astronauts who have spent 9 months stranded on the International Space Station finally come home. Now, a quick recap, Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore travelled to the ISS in June last year on an 8-day mission, but a technical issue on their Boeing spacecraft prevented them from returning to Earth, and they have been there ever since. Count them, 9 months. That's a pregnancy, people. I know how hard that is, so I really feel for Butch and Sonny. Overnight, a SpaceX capsule docked at the station to deliver 4 new astronauts and provide a way home for Williams and Wilmore.
Yeah, the pair will help get the 4 newcomers ready before they depart the ISS on Wednesday night our time. They'll splash down in waters off Florida before being helicoptered back to land to be reunited with their families after 9 very long months, as you mentioned there. Hey, look, just so you can understand, for anyone who's sitting there scratching their head going, why is this such a big deal? Most long space missions go for about 6 months, and that's a maximum. That is like a hard and fast thing that they do not go past 6 months. And the longest ever on record is 437 days. So it's totally understandable why these 2 want to get home and get off the International Space Station, though they have not said that, though all the commentary around it has been they are trained for this, they are ready for this. I'm sorry, but if you're going up to space for 8 days and you're out there for 9 months, ain't nobody happy. Nobody's sitting there going, yay, I'm so happy I'm still here.
Yeah, and look, while, we might have a laugh here, when they come back, the reconditioning that they'll have to undergo is really, really intense, similar to what people who come out of a coma have to go through. They're going to have significant and irreparable bone density loss. It causes muscles to waste all over your body. Your heart doesn't work as well because it hasn't had to pump as hard to pump blood around your body. They're going to struggle to walk, get dizzy easily, have bad eyesight because the buildup of fluid changes the shape of your eyeballs.
Oh my gosh.
One other surprising challenge is because clothing floats off your skin when you're in space, when you come back down, your skin is like a baby's. It's super duper sensitive.
Oh.
So some astronauts have reported feeling like their clothes are like sandpaper on their skin.
Yeah, no, I was thinking it's like a really good skin treatment. You're coming back with a
Oh,
youthful
no,
glow.
no.
No, this is terrible.
And understandably, depression and anxiety are really common as well. Something interesting, though, is called the overview effect that astronauts can experience after coming back down to Earth. And this is quite profound. Seeing the curvature of the Earth from above as its own kind of spaceship has led some astronauts to report this incredible connection to humanity and an immediate sense of its fragility.
Oh, that's really cute.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, they're very privileged to be in that position to do what very, very few people ever do, but we can't ignore the immense toll that it has taken on their bodies. And so we wish them a very safe flight back. And hopefully Thursday morning we'll have some news of what's happening with that because they're due to take off Wednesday night. So we'll keep you posted. Chris, thank you so much. Next up, we are getting into our deep dive, looking into Clive Palmer's latest bid for political domination. After 2022, we thought we were rid of Clive Palmer. We were wrong.
Australia should be for all Australians living here. Trumpet of Patriots will put Australians first and make Australia great again. While Labor and Liberals are for they, them, the Trumpet of Patriots are for you.
The 70-year-old billionaire is back for the 2025 election with a new party and a new ad campaign.
There are two genders, male and female. We don't want men in women's sports. We don't want males dressed as females confusing our children in schools. All children should be entitled to a normal, safe environment in our schools and in our public toilets. All children must be entitled to decide who they are when they become adults.
That was Sue Ellen Wrightson. She's the leader of the Trumpet of Patriots and the next PM, according to Palmer. His tilt at political domination with the Trumpet of Patriots comes after the epic failure of the 2022 campaign. To refresh your memory, he spent $100 million on advertising and running 150 candidates for the United Australia Party to get one single MP elected. This time around, he's promising to do pretty much the same thing. Flood our phones, roadside billboards and TVs with ads to campaign on what he thinks should be a battle of ideas this election. And those ideas are being lifted straight out of the Donald Trump playbook. If 2022 was about COVID and freedom, 2025 is zooming in on government efficiency, gender and immigration. So, will Palmer's latest bid deliver him more success than his failure in 2022? How will Trump politics fly down under? And should we have to put up with his incessant advertising campaign for yet another election cycle? Monash University's political scientist Dr Benjamin Moffitt is joining me now to explain. Dr Moffitt, welcome to the briefing. Why on earth is Clive Palmer back on our TV screens trying to make a political comeback after the disaster that was the 2022 election?
In his National Press Club address last week, he actually gave away the game. He said, "This is like golf to me. I'm turning 71 soon. I could take up lawn bowls, but this is much more fun to me." And I actually thought it was a pretty revealing comment.
This is my golf. At 70, I could join many Australians and play lawn bowls. Right? I find this more exciting talking to you than playing lawn bowls.
This has been a waste of money. His ideological position has shifted. This is the fourth election that he's running some version of a Palmer-ish party. This is a bit of a game to him, I think. He's not a true ideologue. When you look at something like One Nation, you know why they're doing it. They keep going because they hate immigration. Palmer the position shifts every election. The policies shift. So I found that quite revealing, that comment.
Can you explain to us why he's had to launch a new party this time around, the Trumpet of Patriots?
He has a history of kind of registering parties and then deregistering them. We've gone through Palmer United Party, he's gone United Australia Party. All of those have kind of gone through that journey. Now, United Australia Party voluntarily deregistered for what they said were administrative reasons. We're still not entirely clear what those administrative reasons were. And you can't re-register a party in the same period of government as you deregistered it. So, for example, he could have deregistered it and then they very well may, re-register the United Australia Party after the upcoming election. That would be fine. That's the reason they got in trouble, and they challenged this in the High Court. I don't think we would even be talking about the Trumpet of Patriots. We wouldn't know what this party is or this term if that hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm. Is Clive himself running this time around?
No, he says he's too old, but he's the party chairman. So basically what we've got here is someone who's throwing their money behind this party is, for all intents and purposes, actually kind of the most visible public face of the party, but you can't actually vote for him. He's got a former United Australia Party member, Sue Ellen Wrightson, running in the seat of Hunter. She's the lead candidate of the party, the leader of the party, but I think we know who's paying the bills, who's pulling the strings.
What about his choice of name for the new party, Trumpet of Patriots? Is that supposed to just make us think about Donald Trump?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I wonder if he didn't find this party, because this party was named this before Palmer came along. It had this kind of strange name, and very minor party, very, very minor. It's only on a couple of local councils, essentially. I suspect they've scouted around and gone, oh, are there any small parties essentially we can take over, remaking our image with good names? And this fit the bill. I think it really is as simple as that. The Trumpet of Patriots, obviously we've got the Trump in there, but we've also got the Patriots. Be proud of your country, this kind of nationalist zeal that he's going for in this election, talking about, immigration too high, let's get housing back on track for Australians. So I think it ticks the box in both those regards.
Yeah, let's talk about the policies. So government efficiency, gender issues, immigration, like you mentioned, all of these are straight from Donald Trump's playbook. Do you think it can work in Australia?
I think taking from the playbook can work to some extent, but I think he's got a pretty crowded marketplace in terms of doing that. I mean, the coalition has done the same thing and it's obviously far more established and has far more reach in doing so. So we've seen Peter Dutton bringing Jacinta Price as kind of this government efficacy minister, shadow minister, directly copying Musk's DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency. We've seen a number of these sort of things happening over the last few months where Dutton's essentially just borrowing, copying, depending how you want to read it, what's going over there in Trump. We've got the same kind of, there's balloons being put up about, attacks on, we're going to shut down woke universities. I mean, this is direct culture war stuff from the US. So I think unlike last time where Palmer went hard on the kind of anti-vax, the freedom message, and was able to brand the party as the Freedom Party. It's going to be a bit tougher this time. I guess the difference being that he's being extremely explicit. If you go on the party's website, it's all about we need policies that are just like Trump. They're saying it outright. So do I think it will succeed? No. I think if you want Trump-esque policies, there's a lot of other places. You can park your vote in a lot of other more visible and probably successful places.
And now I do want to talk about his National Press Club address from last week. There's a grab I want for us to listen to. He said this.
The Australian government only provides Food Bank with $1 million a year. It gives $600 million to Papua New Guinea to have a rugby league team. We've got to wake up in this country and wake up what's really happening. You're feeling suffering and hardship at the moment, but it's only a precursor of what's coming in the future.
Now, that sort of language would probably appeal to a lot of voters who think that, we should be prioritising local issues and local people over international issues. But what Clive Palmer fails to actually address here is that the PNG NRL team is an exercise in soft diplomacy. That is trying to minimise the threat of China in the Pacific by extending this hand of mateship to a country like Papua New Guinea, which has been a friend for a long time. And I guess for me and the question that I have is, how much of an issue is it when we stop employing politicians in these roles that have traditionally been held, have always been held by politicians, and we put in place people like, obviously not Clive Palmer because he's not running, but people who subscribe to Clive Palmer's ideology, people like Donald Trump who take these simplistic view of world issues. What path do we then go down as a nation, as a globe?
I mean, obviously there's a dangerous path. I mean, you mentioned Donald Trump, and we've seen in just the last month, that Trump's been inaugurated. The whole world order has changed, and these trying to take over Canada, Greenland, trade wars, on the whim essentially of one person. In democracy, we want to have a wide array of views represented, and we want to have a wide array of people. It's not just a business, I guess, for technocrats and people with the quote-unquote right education or right views. But at the same time, particularly populist politicians, which Trump is, which Palmer is, which, as you said, take simplistic lines on these kind of things, which are not simple issues at all. Even the idea, as you mentioned, of soft power that's a long game. That's a long strategic game that is to our benefit in the long run because it avoids outright violence. So the risk there is that by employing these very simple, quote unquote, fixes, we actually inflame much bigger issues that down the line turn into real existential threats to not only our democracy, but our basic security.
Now I want to turn our attention to his advertising blitz, which has already started. If you watch Married at First Sight, I have a couple of friends who watch it and they're like, oh, what is going on with these Clive Palmer ads and these ads from his party? Now, he claims it's all about exposing Australians to a wide range of ideas this election cycle, giving people a broader selection of candidates to choose from. Here's what he said.
It's not just standing for elections. It's not just getting candidates elected. It's a battle of ideas. We need new ideas in this country. We need to be reinvigorated. We need to set sail to a much better sunset than what we're experiencing at the moment.
What do you make of that statement?
I mean, to be blunt, I think it's arse covering. After the last election, he spent $100 million and only got one senator who's basically an internet troll elected. So to say, actually, I'm not in this just to get people elected. It's about the contest of ideas, I think is covering his backside in terms of saying, people going again, why are you doing this? Why are you wasting all this money? Because if it was about the contest of ideas, there'd be some new ideas in this policy, whereas what he's bringing in is rehashed US culture war stuff mixed with some more protectionist, old school social democratic ideas. Even their party strategy is seriously a waste of money in terms of, if he could build a serious party. He could actually organize it properly. He could have party discipline. He could actually have some semblance of a movement party. But he doesn't seem interested in the hard work about that. So he's a media magnet, and I think that media part is important there. It's about the messaging rather than the actual hard work of what party politics looks like.
But to play devil's advocate, he says he's invested in democracy and in stepping up for his country. Why don't you buy that from him?
There seems to be no sense of learning from previous mistakes. The best Palmer United Party, or the many parties or United Australia Party has done, was the first time round, and he lost pretty much every politician, every representative, some of whom are still, there's no Jack. People forget Jackie Lambie came from that party. He'd be going, what did we do wrong last time? And how can we do it again? That's why I don't quite buy it.
Look, journalists at The Age protested last week over one of the ads that referenced there being only two genders, and we heard that at the top of the show. The publisher of the Newcastle Herald has also apologised for running that ad after backlash. I'm curious to hear what you think about the issue that brings up of free speech in politics. There would be a lot of people who agree with the party and agree with Clive Palmer on that issue. So why are we seeing, media companies having to withdraw and apologise for running a political ad?
I think because it's deliberately inflammatory first. Secondly, this goes to the amateurish nature of this. Clive Palmer last week at the National Press Club had to apologise because they couldn't even get this right. What they were trying to argue, the catchphrase of this kind of movement is that there's only two sexes. They read the saying there's only two genders.
What we're saying is simply that debate has taken over our country's priorities, and it shouldn't have. That's really what I'm trying to say.
It's become one of your priorities.
Yeah. So my priority is
counterintuitive.
I'll have to bow and apologise to you and say there are only two sexes. That's what I meant to say. There's either a man or a woman.
The fact that they can't even get this right speaks to something going on there. This is just true. They're not serious about these positions. I've never heard him mention this in previous political campaigns. It's rehashed culture war stuff that they can't even get the phrasing right. They're not versed in these actual discussions. If One Nation had the money to run those front page ads and said, there's only two races, black and white, people would be similarly outraged because it's deliberately inflammatory. It's scientifically incorrect. It's doing nothing but sowing discord and disharmony. Yes, freedom of speech, but at the same time, newspapers have the right to make decisions about the kind of things that they run and the kind of advertisements they accept. And to some extent, this is dirty money. I mean, you don't have to run those ads.
Benjamin, before we let you go, do you think the Australian political landscape has shifted enough in the last 3 years that a party like this, with the policies that we've talked about and with a leader like, or, you know, a backer like Clive Palmer and a leader like Sue Ellen Wrightson could actually get some traction, particularly after what we've just witnessed happen in the US, where people really didn't think that Donald Trump would get elected for a second term, yet here we are, he's president again. Do you think they might have something this time around because of what's happened over the last 3 years?
I think the landscape is very hospitable to the kind of messaging that Palmer's putting out there, but the political landscape, like in terms of the party landscape, is actually going to be pretty crowded in terms of if you're interested in these kind of issues, there's the coalition and there's a whole range of quite visible minor right parties now, One Nation, but also Libertarian Party, Family First is trying it again, Jared Rennick's got his own party, that are all going to be kind of fighting for that minor right vote. So the messaging, yes, maybe that anti-elite sentiment, kind of anti-woke values, that obviously internationally and more broadly across the globe is very popular at the moment. But there's a lot of people trying to do it in this country, and it's going to be an interesting election in that regard. Who wins that constituency?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, it is a crowded space. We'll see if the Trumpet of Patriots has what it takes this time around. Benjamin Moffitt, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was Dr Benjamin Moffitt from Monash University speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. Thanks so much for joining us. Before you go, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone who you think might enjoy it. And we would also love you to go and check us out on social media at The Briefing Podcast or Listener Newsroom if you're on TikTok and YouTube. Share one of our posts, like, subscribe, comment. It all helps us continue to spread the message of what we do here at The Briefing, and it allows us to keep doing what we do here at The Briefing. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. Tash will be with you this Savo, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning.
Listener.